look over to the book of Proverbs with me. If you do that, Proverbs 14, while you're turning there, we are giving out copies of our church mortgage for our mortgage burning. If a family reaches a goal of $2,000, we give them away. If a teenager reaches a goal of $365, $1 a day for the year. And this evening, we've got one to give out. You want to take this, Matt? This is Ken and Karen Peterson, and appreciate their faithfulness and helping us out. That's a great thing, and the Petersons are now free. Their last child was married on Saturday night. Now they just doesn't matter anymore. And now you worry more, right? They're out of your control. And those poor boys in the hands of another woman and all that scary stuff. But anyway, it's good to be here, and I'm so thankful for you young people. We didn't get to meet our guests tonight. I apologize. Let's take a minute. If you're brand new tonight, and our ushers are out taking care of offering, but if you're brand new tonight, we just like to meet our guests. If you've got a visitor, I know who's got a guest back there in the back. Cassie, who's with you? Good to have you with us from college. Glad you're here. Anybody else visiting? We got the guys from Parkway Baptist here. Raise your hand, Kevin and company. All five of you guys. There we go. I said, what brings you down here? I said, Pastor Beard's on vacation and somebody else is preaching. No, their church is tomorrow night. It's Thursday night, so I'm teasing. That's not. But anyway, Kevin graduated from our school, and these other guys from Parkway go to our camps and things. Glad you're here, fellas. Back there, Judy. Good to have you here, Linda. Thank you for coming. Glad you're with us tonight. Good. Anybody else visiting tonight? We're always happy to have guests, and it's a good thing to be here. Oh, also, I've got a MP3, 4 sermons from the pastor's conference we went to up in Santa Clara. If anybody wants to get this, it's all 4 messages on one CD. And I want to encourage you to be praying for Neil Young. He's limping around after surgery on his knee, and anyway, he just needs to get himself back going and in order. Proverbs 14 in your Bible, and we've just been, it would take a long time to go verse by verse through the book of Proverbs, and so we're not doing that. We're kind of taking a passage here and a passage there week to week, talking about, I'd like to get everybody passionate about the book of Proverbs, especially young people. If you're under 40, you ought to be reading Proverbs every day, just because there's so much in it. Marriage, money, mouth, the 3 big M's, and work ethic. I don't know how to get work to an M. You can figure out an adjective or a synonym, but it talks about work, talks about your relationships to men and women, talks about, the book of Proverbs has got a handful of principles, a lot about listening to advice, listening to advice in general, listening to your parents, that kind of advice, trusting good counsel. The book of Proverbs is just a 31 chapters of brilliant, divinely inspired information to help put our lives in order. And just today, I was talking to someone today out in the ministry, and they called the other day and they said, "Oh, I made a mess." And and you know what happened? They said something they shouldn't say, and somebody's having to figure out how to bandage it up. And I said, here's a good lesson to learn. You rarely make someone mad being quiet, unless you're married to them, and then sometimes you just can't win. You talk, they're mad. You're quiet, they're mad. But they said, "Yeah, I figured that out. Just a little bit late now." And but we talked through a half dozen verses in Proverbs. Just theirs that speaketh like the piercing of the sword, but the tongue of the wise is health. A wise tongue brings health, and an unwise tongue, you might be right, but you hurt people. And just knowing what to say and when to say it, it's an act of God. James says the tongue is a fire, and it's a world of iniquity. The tongue is set on fire of hell. And it says the tongue can no man tame. Only God can tame a tongue. And that's why we need a lot of his word in our hearts so that we'll talk carefully. Anyway, all kinds of lessons. But tonight, Proverbs chapter 14, we're going to just go through first 6, 8 verses, maybe 10 verses, depending on time. And just we'll stay pretty much right here. Every wise woman buildeth her house, but the foolish plucketh it down with her hands. And as we look at this, just thinking about you ladies, are you building or are you plucking down your home? The lady, Dr. Hiles, our pastor, is up in heaven now. He said the woman is the Holy Spirit in the home. The woman is like the thermostat. And if you just turn the thermostat down to cold, the whole house is cold. And that the spirit of the woman is so very powerful. And you ladies, you've got to work at this thing, because every day is a little different, and some days are harder than others. But I'll tell you, we are helpless. And that's to tell you the greatness of our church, the blessing of this ministry has been even, steady ladies. It just is. And I believe we've got great men. And ever since long before I started the church, I wanted a church full of men, and we have that. We have a man's church, very strong. You look around the room tonight, this is not a room full of ladies and kids with a couple of, cigarette smoking, beer drinking men. All the men in here cigarette smoke and drink beer. But it's always been, we've always been strong on strong men and good men, godly men, and that's just how it's been. God's done some wonderful things for us, but there's no way we can do it without a good wife. And we're just, the Spirit is there. So every wise woman buildeth their house. A lady is, let's just talk about children, and I'm not talking about your own children. I'm talking about you're the oldest girl in the house, and there are siblings younger than you. A girl sets a mood, and if in the Bailey home, if Trent doesn't have a good spirit, nobody cares. If Chloe's got a bad spirit, Dad kills her. And but it's just anyway, there's nothing, we all understand it. Why should we talk about the obvious, right? So, but a woman builds her house in spirit. A wise woman builds her house, and she sets out to say, I'm going to build a good spirited home. And you can do that. You can build a roller coaster home. Or you can build a woe is me, everything's bad home. Or you can build a cross me, I'll punch you out kind of a home. But it's up to the lady. And I think ladies, and you young ladies, you ought to start right now and decide, I will be a builder of a good spirit, a godly spirit. I'm going to be look, I love our office. My office is at the end of the main hallway, and Brother Josh, Brother Ron, Christian down at the other end of that hallway. But the main hallway down there is all the ladies, Rachel and Liz and Lynn and Esther and my wife, that whole hallway. And you know what? They just laugh and cut up. It makes the office a happy place. And sometimes I worry when it's real quiet. I think, ooh, who got mad at who down there? I just keep my door shut and don't go down. I text the guys at the other end of the hall. But go around the back of the building. It's quiet. But there's such a spirit. The lady can build and I don't mean spooky spirit, Holy Spirit. I mean just the air, the atmosphere is so very powerful. A lady can build submission. A lady can teach her children to trust the dad, to trust the coach, to trust the teacher. And it's a spirit, and it's up to the lady. The wise woman buildeth her house. She's building her house to get her kids to be on board. And a lady who's constantly arguing and griping and fighting with leaders in her life is going to have an awful hard time teaching her children to trust the teacher, the coach, or the leadership in their life. It's just impossible to do that. And so again, the lady builds the spirit of submission. A lady builds a spirit of love for right. Just when a lady loves right passionately, there's something that just it's not always taught, it's caught. it's seen. I think it's taught as well, but if they don't see it, and we'll see in a minute the double standard that happens along the way. But ladies, just unbelievable power and influence. Your influence is so huge. A foolish woman plucks down her house with words, with attitudes, with actions, and just tears it down. Tears down the husband, tears down the kids, tears down right, tears down authority, tears down just basic holiness. I remember years ago, one of our girls was just wrestling with garbage music and just had too much of the world's music in her life. And I don't know if it was me or Brother Beal, one of us just asked her, said, when did you first start getting comfortable with the world's music? And she said, riding in the car with my mom.
That's right. Amen.
Because the dad wouldn't have any music at home that was inappropriate, but the mom just loved her oldies. And then the kids sitting at home or sitting in the parking lot waiting for Sunday school or whatever, listening to the same music, and then you go to the worse and worse music. And music touches the soul. Music is not amoral. Amoral meaning no morality. That the music, lyrics can be right or wrong, but the music, no, that's not true. The music can affect the soul. And the easiest way to decide that is what's the dominant factor. I have a mind that requires lyrics. I have a body that is touched by the bass or the rhythm. And I have a soul that's touched by harmony and melody. And those things work together. And all of us know your body shouldn't be the thing that leads us.
That's right.
Your body leads you wrong in the kitchen. Your body leads you wrong on a date. Your body leads you wrong most all the time. And if you let your body lead in a relationship, you are going to get involved physically before it's appropriate. And as soon as your body gets involved, it's like modern music. It just shuts the brain off. It shuts off the harmony and the melody. It shuts off the soul. And it's all about body. And that's why people get married. And they've been married for a while, and they think, I don't even like this person. Yeah, and now you start to find out that you have no soul mate. I think it's the decent enough term. They don't like what I like, feel like I feel, believe what I believe, think like I think. What am I doing married to this person? Well, because you let your body lead in the relationship. And that's how you can tell wrong music. When the bass leads, then it's not good music. The lyric should lead because it should get the head. The harmony and the melody should follow as the next most dominant thing. And because that brings peace to the soul. And then the bass should be something very subdued in the background. And look, if you do this in your home, you'll stop a lot of the arguing in your house. Just make sure any music, whether it be a commercial or a TV show, or whether it be something on a radio, if it is dominant bass, pounding, throbbing beat, shut it off. And you know what will happen? You'll start turning down the arguing in the house. And it's such a powerful thing. But see, that's a spirit. A wise woman builds a good spirit, but a foolish woman begins to pluck down the spirit. Years ago, there was a fella, I was there as he graduated from college, and he had a wife and younger teenagers at home. And he was going to start a church somewhere, and I was going to see if we couldn't help him. And there's a bunch of us all standing around together. And he got over there talking to somebody else. And I was just waiting to see if I get a chance to catch him, find out some details. And behind me was his wife and some ladies. And I don't know what brought the subject up, but she said, oh, my husband, he doesn't want us to watch TV, he doesn't want us to watch movies, doesn't want us to watch, primetime shows. So I just tell the kids, wait till dad's gone, and when he goes to work, then we can watch whatever we want. And I thought, I can't support him.
That's right.
He's not a bad man, but he's not going to build a church.
Yeah.
It'd be impossible.
Yes.
Absolutely impossible. And he did go start a church, and I kept tabs on him, and I'm guessing 3 to 5 years, he met in his living room, and just a handful of people, and it never went anywhere. Why? Because somebody was plucking down his house. Piece by, and to pluck doesn't mean bulldozer, right? I'm going to pluck some fruit. The right way to pick fruit is you get your kids out there with a sheet underneath the tree, and you shake the tree, and everything falls down, but plucking it is one little piece at a time. And ladies, you are so very powerful. That's in church, that's in Sunday school, that's in the church nursery, but primarily talking about home. But you ladies, we need you desperately. A lady she can promote hard work, or she can bring in compromise and laziness. The lady can promote an honoring spirit toward others, a complimentary spirit, or she can bring in a spirit of criticism and slander. A lady can bring in a diligent spirit. Let's be busy, let's do something. Or she can bring in a spirit of idleness and a sluggard. It's just completely up to us. To you, ladies, because without you, ladies, we aren't going to do it. Verse 2, he that walketh in his uprightness feareth the Lord, but he that is perverse in his ways despiseth him. That first phrase, he that walketh in his uprightness feareth the Lord. Now, here is a cause-effect kind of a thing. I am walking uprightly, and I'm handling my affairs in an upright, appropriate manner, and that says, I fear God. He that walketh uprightly feareth the Lord. The two go hand in hand. It's like if you ever had a peanut butter and ketchup sandwich. It just isn't the same as peanut butter and jelly. And I'll put ketchup on almost any sandwich except tuna or peanut butter. But he that walks uprightly, you know, in the back of his mind and heart, he has a fear of God. Because the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. When I fear God, it doesn't matter whether anybody's watching or not, I'm walking uprightly. And I'm not going to be perfect, but I'm sure going to be careful, and I'm going to try. And when I stumble, I'm going to catch myself and apologize for the word I shouldn't have spoken. And I may get out of line, and I'll go to that person and say, I'm sorry for my stinking attitude, whatever it might be. But when you walk uprightly, that is an outward showing of an inward fear of God. And sometimes we can create kind of a double standard. And we fuss at home and holler and yell at each other and get in the car and argue all the way to church. And then we pull in the parking lot and flip on the Jesus switch. Hello, Pastor. Well, God bless you. We're so glad to be in fellowship with the brothers and sisters today. That is a fraud beyond description. And you will be found out. Because if you really fear God, you're walking uprightly in the grocery store. Right. If you fear God, you're walking uprightly at work. If you fear God, you're driving down the freeway uprightly. No offense, I'm not going to go to traffic. Christianity we ought to keep the rules and obey right and wrong, except on the freeway. We all, right? Yeah, that's good. Just witness to all the police that pull you over. See how that all goes. Some years ago, somebody said, we were driving in the road and the carpool lane was going slow and the other lanes were going fast, and I'm not saying who was driving. They just crossed over those big 4-foot things that they have. They just thump, 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 and knocked them all over and got in the other lane. If I did that, I guarantee there'd be 3 cops right there. I would never get away with that. So that guy must not be saved, How did he do that and get away with it? If I thought about crossing a double yellow line, I'd get pulled over. But that's a good thing. I know I will get caught. I've got a mother still here in our church and a wife in our church and a daughter in our church. I'm going to get caught. There's just no way. I just got to. But we ought not be holy men of prayer, but unholy in our conversation toward our kids. Now, our Christianity, a real biblical, and I'm not saying that it is harder to be at home. The Christianity at home is the hardest thing to live. And you young people and parents, have some mercy on your kids. At home is the hardest spot, unless it's maybe college dorms. That's got to be a close second. But don't crucify each other over this, because that is the final test. But you can teach a Sunday school lesson and pray and be good to people at church. You ought to be able to be good to the waitress at the restaurant too. if we have an honest fear of God. Now, and I'm not saying fake it and be good, although if you can fake it and be good, go ahead, be good everywhere. But see, this fear of God is what causes me to walk uprightly. And the problem is some of us, we're trying to figure out how to walk uprightly, and I think you should give it your best shot. But what you really need to do, what we really need to do, is work on understanding the fear of God. To read our Bible enough to understand who God is. And in a minute, we're going to look at fools make a mock at sin. And we ought to study this thing out and understand God is a holy God, a righteous God, a dreadful God. It's a fearful thing to fall into the hands of the living God. There ought to be scripture we memorize that comes over here and causes me to walk uprightly. And again, it's nobody's job to say, oh yeah, way to go, Dad, you're acting pretty spiritual. Yeah, that's the time your dad has permission to just kill you and bury you in the backyard and say the cat did it. But we are, don't be stupid. But this is, see what's great about Christianity? It's a personal thing. Obviously, parents that are raised children and a boss has got to run his company, but everything else between you and God. This is people ask me questions, well, do I have to, and how can I, and am I supposed to? Look, you're supposed to do one thing, walk with God and get to know God, and God will guide you. And it's just simple as that. And anyway, I just relax. Christian, learn to walk with God, to know God. So he says, he that walketh in his uprightness feareth the Lord, but he that is perverse in his ways. And here's what's interesting. He despises God. When we accept a perverse lifestyle, we despise God. And what we like the political world. We don't want to be mean or hateful to anybody. We want all moral. There's no right, there's no wrong. We're just all going to be good. And that's not true. We fear God and keep his commandments, or we walk in folly, and that verse says we despise God. And what we want to say is, well, I'm not a drunk. I just have a substance problem. I over-medicate myself. First time I heard that, I almost fell over. You have a problem with over-medicating? Let's see, I think we call that an addiction. I'm not making fun of people, but let's just be honest. I'm not necessarily promoting AA, but and I've never been to a meeting, but what I've heard, first thing you got to do is stand up and say, my name's Bruce, I'm an alcoholic. You got to fess up. Now, I don't agree with saying that 14 years after your last drink. Then it's time to say, I'm Bruce, and I beat it with the help of Jesus Christ. And that's what the victorious Christian life's all about. Not that you were drunk, but God gave you the victory, and you got over your gossiping tongue, your rotten attitude, your drugs, your liquor, whatever it might be. And so it's very, very blunt there. He says, he that is perverse in his ways despised him. Verse 3, in the mouth of the foolish is a rod of pride. Now, I'm not going to take you over this for the sake of time, but if you'll take, just in your mind, make a little mental note, go through the book of Proverbs and look at all the little terms affiliated with the tongue. And see how many different ways it's used. Here he says, in the mouth of the foolish is a rod of pride. In that mouth, in that tongue, what you do with a rod? You hit people with it. You hit people. Remember over in the book of James, can a spring bring forth fresh water and bitter? And you'll find as you go through the Bible, all these illustrations, analogies of what your tongue can do. And your tongue is so capable of so much. And here we've got the example of someone who uses their tongue to beat people. I met with Jamie earlier, Jamie Carr today. She's getting married in a couple of weeks. And I remember one of the things Dr. Evans, our college president, most of you heard him. He's preached here before. He'll be here in a couple months this fall. And before we got married, one of the things Dr. Evans said was never use the club of disapproval. Never use the club of disapproval. And it's interesting you use the term club. Don't beat your spouse explaining how they've failed or how their actions have disappointed you. Let God work on them. Let God develop. You're not the one to properly train, program, and correct your spouse. Probably we've all got our hands full fixing us up. And when I walk out of the pulpit, I don't talk like this. I leave people alone. It's none of my business what you do, where you go, when you do it. But in the pulpit, then it's my business. That's what God called me to do. The mouth of the foolish is a rod of pride. But look at the end of this. But the lips of the wise shall preserve them. You know what preserves are? You open that jelly jar and it pops. And that jelly can last in there almost forever. And you preserve something. And do you know if your mouth is right, it'll make you last. It'll make your friendships last. It'll make your marriage last. It'll make your relationships to your kids last. The Petersons, just their last child, all three married now. And suddenly the relationships change. You can't say things to married kids you used to say to single kids. Now you can, but it's not good for you. And we had a lady, I don't think I've mentioned this in church, but I wouldn't embarrass her, but a newer person who's been coming a couple months, and she's gotten to know some people here, and she's been in church for a long time. I'm going to say all of her life, or a good portion of it. And my wife and she were talking, and the lady said, you know what's amazing about your church? She said, how many third generations they are in your church? She said, I've been in church all my life. I've never had a church where there were grandpas and grandmas and married kids and grandkids. She said, and it's all over your church. And sometimes we forget, you know what that is? Somebody's preserving this place. That means there is over here a parents who raise some kids, and they married somebody from our church or from somewhere else, but they happened to choose our church to be married and here. And these parents were careful enough with their words. They didn't drive that relationship away. They preserved that thing. And then when these people started raising their own children, these people really had to be careful with their words. See, if you look at that, in the mouth of the foolish is a rod of pride, but the lips of the wise shall preserve them. These grandparents, they have to become very wise, not a wise mouth, Mr. House. Wise, discreet, prudent, careful, and very wise in their words. And then the kids likewise have to be wise, because these people are my parents, but we're in a relationship all our own. And this is our home, and this is our family, and my parents may have done something this way, and I do it a little bit different like this, and we're both going to respect each other. When I go to their house, I'm going to honor them. They go to my house, they'll honor me. And again, we have young people that scatter everywhere. Our folks are scattered not only around our valley, but around the country, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I love our young people, but understand this: if you're going to stay close to your children as they get older, boy, first of all, you better hope they marry the right person, because a lot of times the spouse pulls the kids from their parents, and that's very wrong. I couldn't even imagine getting married and pulling my wife away from the people who gave me her. Let me just talk about criminal for a minute. That is criminal. This is a commercial break. I fell in love with my wife and married her. That means I liked the product, and I liked the factory that produced it. And I'm going to back them. I owe them. That next generation above my wife, I owe them. And when she was driving, her first car was about a 1967 Chevy station wagon with a 3-speed on the column and a clutch. And she'd race the boys. She could really make that old station wagon move, and she could haul all her friends around at the same time. But she always had a bigger car. And I remember her dad saying one time, I don't like those little foreign cars. I want some steel around my daughter. And you can check out what she's driven for 35 years. Out of respect for my father-in-law, I've always put her in a car with some beef around her. And it meant something to him. And if you don't like your wife and you want to put her in a Prius, it's all right. I'm teasing. I'm going to buy a Prius now that my youngest is going off to college. But But that's a little bit. You know what? When we brought the Beals on staff, he had a very lucrative position with Rockwell, and I thought, he is taking a huge cut in pay, and I remember, I don't know if Mrs. Beal remembers, but I remember telling her, I will make sure you somehow find a way to visit your parents at least each year. And if they're not out here, we're going to find a way to get you guys there. And we helped on a few occasions getting the whole family back to see family. I think family's important. I think we ought to love our family. Now, my parents don't run me, and my wife's parents don't run us. There's my father-in-law we lost Mrs. Goddard's mom a year ago, and it's very awkward right now without his wife there, and he needs some care and all, and we're not going to change our world, but whatever we can do within the realm of the will of God here, we want to help, and we're going to honor our parents, but this preserving, we've got a daughter in Baltimore. We work at preserving the relationship there. I am very careful what I say. Very careful. Yesterday, I was getting ready to teach my class about 20 to 7, and the class starts at 7, and my phone and my iPad start ringing. Jordan, our son-in-law, wanted to FaceTime with us. And I thought, that's quite a son-in-law wants to FaceTime with his father-in-law. He probably thought I was with Mrs. Goddard. But anyway, so, I pushed the accept, and the grandson's face is this close to hi, Papa. I would not want to offend them. I want to use my words with very great care and respect. They're adults. They've got a life. They've got a privilege to do and be, and I want to know they're loved here. And when they were moving, and when you move and you lose everything, can't find a thing, and I knew what was going on. And then the day of the move got extended. You know how escrows never close on time. Have anybody ever had an escrow close on time? I'm sure that happens. One of you, yeah, a couple of you, because you probably cheated, but you paid off the broker or something. But Hannah and Jordan they just knew the escrow. They had it all planned, and I said, it's not going to close on time. It doesn't work that way. And Jordan was having to go to church. He didn't have a suit and couldn't find shoes and all this stuff. And so I just wrote a check and sent him a text, said, hey, just so you know, there's a check in the mail. For anything you need, you can spend it now. The check will be there in a couple of days. And look, if wise words don't do it, wise checkbooks will really help. Just invest. It's not going to happen to you guys. You're close. Matt was getting excited. Yeah, you're dreaming. They live a long ways away. But I want to preserve. Someone comes here for a few visits and says, hey, I noticed, and they point out something. Steve Sandberg, and Steve's vacationing with the family, but I remember the first time Steve Sandberg was at our church, and Wayne Record and Jerry Woolley knocked on his door, and he and his family, wife and kids came, and I went there on that next week to visit him, and we got visiting a little bit, and he asked me about the King James. He said, my wife reads the New King James. Now, I have some very strong convictions about versions of the Bible. And I said, she's reading a devil book. No, I didn't. I said, if I'm not mistaken, the Bible says anybody who seeks God, he will be found by them. I wasn't going to argue. No way was I going to argue with him. And Jesus said, I have many things to say to you. Talking to his disciples now. He said, I have many things to say to you, but you're not able to bear them. There are things you know that other people aren't ready for. Keep your mouth shut. And a little bit later in 1 Corinthians and in Hebrews, it says that when for the time you ought to be teachers, you have need that one teach you again, which be the first principles, the oracles of Christ. There are people who they can't take. He says, they said strong meat belongs to them who are of full age, even those who by reason of use have their senses exercised to discern both good and evil. There are things you can say that are strong meat of the Christian life that people are going to gag on. Got to be very careful We ought to be very, very discreet, and our goal, and I'm not telling you I've not messed things up, but I want to preserve. Verse 4, where no oxen are, the crib is clean, but much increases by the strength of the ox. Now, we're not going to get much further than this because I got a lot of notes on this one. The mount, where no oxen, now you know the first part of this, where no oxen. What's an oxen do? An oxen pulls the plow. What's an oxen do? He pulls the cart. He moves the grinding wheel to grind the grain. The ox is a producer of profit. The ox is a part of bringing in the harvest. The ox is a part of making the farmer rich, or at least feeding the farmer. That ox is vital. Without the ox, the man's pulling his own plow. Without the ox, the kids are pushing the grinding wheel. And man, you need the ox. You need that big old, dirty, dumb ox. But you know what you get when you get an ox? If you don't know, go to John's Dairy. Where no oxen are, the crib is clean. You want a clean crib? The crib meaning the pen where you keep the oxen. That crib will only be clean when you don't have an ox. So could I make the exact thing? If you don't have a messy crib, you're not eating. If you don't have a messy crib, you're not prospering. You don't have any grain to sell. If you don't have a messy crib, you don't have a wagon to pull your goods into town to sell them. Without that dirty, stinky, manure-filled crib, we're not talking about a baby crib here, okay? You city people who don't understand farm terminology. Actually, where we were, the crib was where you put the food and they ate out of it. But anyway, that's this cultural words, but man, that thing, it might stink. It'll be messy. Someone's got to shovel it out. Now, without that messy crib, you're not going to have prosperity. You're not going to have food. You're not going to have a whole lot of things get done. Could I bring it to Faith Baptist Church? Without the rough, dirty, stinky things of the ministry, we're not going to produce much. Let me just throw out, this will come up in a sermon later, but why do we want to pay the mortgage off?
Amen.
So we can go, well, now I can spend some more of my own money. Why do we want to be debt-free? Is anybody more going to get saved the Sunday after the mortgage is paid off than the Sunday before? Only if we stay messy. All these kids that come in, this mess of Sunday school and children's church, all the mess of buses, all the mess needing mechanics. By the way, we need more hours on our mechanics. We need more mechanic. Our mechanics are old, crippled, deaf, and blind. We need more mechanics. It's a messy thing to produce souls saved. It's a messy thing. The youth department, and again, our church is so good, but candy sale. And you know, it's sad to be selling candy this time of year. That's really sad. Would you like one of my boneless candy bars? Melted. You know, why do we have the candy sale? Why do we have the car wash? All this mess with this youth department, because the mess is what produces. That's what makes us rich. That's what gives us that teen choir that just sang. It's a mess. It's choir practice. By the way, adult choir, you know what? If we don't want to have to pay a price, sacrifice, give any, deal with the inconvenience, we're not going to have good music. We're not going to have, that's why you bring in a rock band, because then all you need is one former druggie or his current druggie on the drums, couple of crazies on the guitar, and somebody that'll sway back and forth and scream at you. We don't have to have a whole choir. We don't have to have a bunch of special music and instruments in an orchestra. Where no oxen are, the crib is clean. Being productive is a messy thing. That's why tomorrow night we need some people with us knocking on doors. That's why Saturday morning we need some people knocking on doors. That's why we'll be in the rest home on Saturday and on Sunday, and we'll be in the jails on Saturday and on Sunday. Why? Because it is a messy job to be prosperous. And the only reason that I know of to be out of debt is to be able to take that money and spend it on the work of God instead of giving it to a bank.
Amen.
That's the only reason. Because if we're getting out of debt so we can keep more, I have a problem believing that's Christian. It's up to you, it's your money. But I do get to preach 3 times a week. Where no oxen are, the crib is clean. To produce much demands a mess. Much increases by the strength of the ox. A faithful witness will not lie. Skip down to one verse. Well, there's so many here. Let's go to verse 7. Go from the presence of a foolish man when thou perceivest not in him the lips of knowledge. Let me just say there are people that you should not listen to. Go from the presence of a foolish man. There are people you shouldn't get advice from. How about this? When somebody's, are you ready? Some of you need to buckle your seatbelt. When the success of your business is based on you getting another brother or sister in Christ's money by getting them into your little pyramid, that is somebody you probably should not be listening to. Go from the presence of a foolish man. When a guy comes to you and says, this is where you can make big money. Well, first, let's see how many people like you have big money. Because what happens is you take a whole bunch of people that are barely existing and you take some of each of their money and it makes this guy look successful. And he tells this group, you can be like me. Well, how did he get successful? He took something from all of them. Well, how can they be successful? Go find some other people to leech off of. And tell them they can be successful. How do they get successful? That's not rendering a service, that's taking things from people. I've got a lot more to say on that will come up in the days to come. But there's people on the Christian radio you shouldn't listen to. Go from the presence of a foolish man. And how do you know? You should go to the Holy Spirit. He'll tell you. There's things on the so-called Christian. I don't know anybody on the radio that I could listen to. But you've got to figure that out. There are people at work that suddenly they know you're saved and they're going to want to talk about Jesus and they don't have a clue what the Bible says about holy living and separated living and godly Christian living. And you're going to need to graciously distance yourself from them. You know, the guy who was drinking beer with you before you got saved, now that you're saved, he wants to talk Bible with you? Probably not. There are books that you shouldn't read. There are blogs on the internet. You shouldn't be reading their blogs. You look at it and you think, there's something fishy about this. Just back off and come back around. It's not wrong for you to distance yourself. You don't have to hate people. Just keep some distance. Be good to people. Just arm's length. I love you from there. It's very, very simple. This thing, we all ought to embrace each other and love each other. No. You want your daughter being buddies with the child molester down the street? No, you believe in separation. We all believe in separation at some point. And spiritually speaking, there are people, he says, when thou perceivest not in him the lips of knowledge, there are people that you and I should just stop listening to. And you just have to be watchful. You have to pay attention. You should pay attention who your kids hang around. You should pay attention who you hang around. And you should be very guarded. You young people that are single, you should be very careful. Because if you're not careful, you can give your heart to somebody you have no business giving your heart to. And you're going to fall in love with somebody. And, I'll never forget, we had a wedding many, many years ago. No one probably knows this story. But at the door of I think it was the orange and white tent, a bride-to-be and the maid of honor were standing at the door right there, and the groom and I had just walked up to the platform, and the bride looked at the maid of honor and said, I should not be marrying him. This is all wrong. And man, thank God for the maid of honor. She said, let's go. I will leave with you. And the bride said, nope, got to go through with it. Whether it's the right guy or not, we're here this far. We got to, you don't got to do nothing. I've heard of a lot of old songs about being left at the altar. You know, let the guy write a song and make some money. She didn't listen to her maid of honor, but by the way, if you're ever a bridesmaid, you be on the girl's side. If she knows what she shouldn't do, she shouldn't do it. And if you know where you should be and shouldn't be, boy, we'd be so very guarded. We better pray. Father, bless us. Teach us from your book. Thank you for this wonderful book full of truth.